The views and opinions expressed in this show and the comments on this channel are those of the speakers or authors, and do not reflect or represent the views and opinions of MediaWorks Studios, a division of We Podcast Incorporated.
Hello, and welcome to CMHA's Keep Connected podcast. Thank you for listening each and every week we film. Today we are accompanied by an awesome individual, Peter Corio. He is the Director of Public Relations at Noah's House, a mental health foundation. It is a new resource that we currently have here in Windsor-Essex County. And I don't know about you, Ewelina, but I'm pretty excited to have and welcome Peter here onto the show to get the word out about an amazing resource for youth.
Absolutely. Thanks, Peter, for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's an honor.
So, Peter, I don't know if everyone knows about Noah's House. Can you give us some background of what Noah's House is and kind of the idea behind it, why it came to existence, the purpose of it, and your involvement of, why Noah's House? If you could tell us the story behind that.
So Noah's House is in honor of Noah Butcher Hagel, who was one of my longest running friends. I played hockey with him, soccer with him, went to grade school with him. He was one of the biggest parts of my life for pretty much my entire childhood. And he had suffered from depression throughout his life, and it ended up taking his life in 2017. And since then, his family, friends like myself, we all wanted to find a way to capture spirit, not necessarily just make meaning of the fact that he passed away, but also something that kept his presence when he was alive still going. And
Noah, I love how, you mentioned in regards to Noah's tenacity to stick up and, advocate for those individuals, be that person. And it really sounds like his legacy and what you all wanted to do for Noah, in memory of Noah, creating a drop-in center for those individuals. I don't know, I'm putting this in my own words, but just what you spoke of about Noah, I just visualize Noah's House is where Noah's basically, has your back.
Oh, yeah.
For those individuals that they don't have somebody sticking up for them. They don't have someone advocating for them. And a drop-in center is about, meeting people where they're at.
Oh yeah, and that's what holds the most weight to me too, is the fact that it's not just, this tragic thing happened, so we'll do something in his name. It actually takes what he lived for, what he represented, and the position he had in people's lives, and actually recreating that in a way where it can reach the whole community and people that are struggling inside. So that's what really touched me the most about it all.
Now, when you spoke about Noah and you indicated that Noah had struggled with depression, I really, we had a conversation and you spoke about how you had a lot of growth through grief, the grief that you experienced by losing Noah, and you had a chance to really change your perception around the word depression. Explain that for me a bit, and to others listening in, about how you changed that script.
Towards the end of high school, around that time, I'd been depressed, and it wasn't something I could explain to people. It was more like I knew the signs, I couldn't look at somebody in the eye when I could talk to them, or I was, losing sleep at night, all the normal signs, but I didn't know why this was exactly happening to me. So I didn't tell anybody, not friends, not family, because the stigma at the time was that an event had to cause it, and I couldn't really point to anything. So a couple years later is when Noah died, and by then I had kind of suppressed any of those feelings, just assumed that it was just my mind playing games with me. And so when he died, it kind of brought those feelings back, and when going into that dark place, you kind of remember all the insecurities you had. And I remember I took some time to myself, a good, I'd say 6 weeks. I didn't work, didn't really see anybody. I was just wanting to be in my own company as much as I possibly could. And one thing I noticed is that like I look back at what people were saying when he passed, and a common thing you hear is like, oh well, I'll never get over what happened. I'll just learn to accept it. And then there was some light bulb that went off in my head where I'm like, well, that's kind of represents everything, doesn't it? Like, of course, death is the most, extreme case of permanent pain, but if you have a goal that you don't reach, or you have a relationship that falls apart, like you don't brush it off. You learn to adapt to it. That's why, if you run into your ex at like a grocery store or something, years later, you still have that, feeling like you want to run away.
Yeah.
It's because you didn't get over it. And so I thought to myself, like, hey, so if no one can really brush off everything, why are you pretending to be the guy that can brush off everything? And it's because I'm trying to play something for people. I'm trying to put this image together. And so it turned into, okay, so like, what's this image good for? Well, it's so people think I'm a winner. It's so people think I have it all together, even if I don't. And so it led to like, why do you do that? If it is this making you happy at all? Well, I'm not happy, so it isn't, I guess. So what's the point of having an image in the first place? And I just realized from there, like maybe I was telling the truth about like what my hobbies were and like just natural personality traits, but that's not part of your identity. What's real is the essence, and what the feeling inside was, I was trying to play something to be successful, or play something to be respected. And so at the end of the day, I realized I was lying this whole time, and that as much as I thought I was telling the truth to people, that wasn't the case. And so what I think of now, depression to me is a process. And something like Noah's house, it's not meant to end depression, it's meant to end suicide, I believe. Because depression is something we all need to go through. We all need to go through that realization that your soul needs to run away from the character it's been playing. And so now I don't see whatever people see, like what I wear, what I do, what I accomplish, is not in any way associated with me whatsoever. And I've kind of acted as if, I'm separate from the world, and that's hard to explain. So I'll give kind of an example of it. So so for the last few years, I've coached hockey, and I've also volunteered in like women's rights organizations. And there was a contrast between both of those things that like was symbolic to so many. But the big thing was, when I was in meetings for the women's rights stuff, I conducted myself a different way. I was very serious, and everything had an emphasis behind it, or emotional punch, every word I said, everything I did. When I coached hockey, my whole philosophy was to be a clown for everybody. But that in its own way was just to show like...
Was that to engage like
Yeah.
the youth, like that you were coaching and stuff?
It was my way of like taking myself less seriously so they would take themselves less seriously. It was all about like, because that's a big thing with hockey, is that you have to go into these things and like prove people wrong and prove that you're the superior one. And I just wanted to be the guy that just showed up in the room and I'm like, hey, I don't care.
Yeah.
And everyone
probably relieves so much pressure for so many.
Exactly. And I've noticed that people like started to let themselves go through that. And the same with like the women's rights work I did, was like, it almost felt, when you saw a man care and just blatantly just go with it with all his, emotion and passion, everyone was like, okay, like this, I wish I could do that. I wish I could take the mask off for people too and not have to play this face for everybody. So that's the stuff that sticks with me now, is the essence. It's not about what people see anymore, it's what people feel. And that's kind of what I've taken away from me through this whole thing.
Absolutely. So that's a lot of insight, and that's a lot of knowledge and learning and self-reflection and self-awareness, and so many things and so many lessons learned out of, and everything is a lesson, like you mentioned, those relationships, but there is an emotional process to everything, right?
Yeah, exactly. And everyone needs to go through that separation, because I feel it's different for everybody, but everyone spends the first portion of their life acquiring and achieving all these things, and then you hit a point where you're like, it's no longer holding the weight it's supposed to, and eventually you just let it go and no longer associate with that.
Or finding new things that fulfill those things, right?
But it's all from the intangible for me. It's all through the feeling. It's all through the essence of what goes behind everything I do, not exactly what I do anymore.
And do you find that that's less pressure? Like,
a lot less.
Yeah.
I live like I have nothing to lose now, which is always fun. And I can present myself as in as many different ways as possible, and play as many different characters as I possibly can for people. And just as long as the feeling is still real and it comes from a place of vulnerability, it's freeing for people. And that's kind of what I go after now.
And that's beautiful.
Yeah,
and that's something that
absolutely.
Ewelina and I I think every podcast we've done, I think we like always touch on being your authentic self. And in order to be your authentic self, you truly have to pull from a place of vulnerability, because it does not feel good sometimes to be our authentic selves when perhaps something is being done that we don't really agree on, or somebody says something, right? So at the same time, I mean, my goodness, you experiencing all this during those pivotal years in high school. I mean, high school, can we just, like, you know,
Or even at the beginning of university, or
my
whole
goodness, I
transition.
usually say, like, parents always ask, you know, okay, like my kid's stressed, and all I think is, our poor children. Our children have, and when I say children, I mean, yeah, you know, our children, like, I want to say 10 to 24 years old. I think there's so much change that we start to become ourselves, and we define ourselves through things that we honestly believed were tangible and important. And then it's like almost like a switch goes off. Where, and that's to me what I heard in your story, Peter, when you were talking about, like, you know, what do I have? Like, I don't want to tell people that I'm feeling certain ways, because what do people want to know? Well, there's got to be a reason, because our society is, give me a reason, we can fix that. We can fix it if we have reasons. And it's really scary to sit with everything that you were sitting with and not having a reason. I've been there so many times, and you can lose yourself in that worry of, why am I panicking? Why am I experiencing anxiety? Why? And I too, it's taken me, you, my friend, you've done it in a lot shorter time than I have. It's taken me like freaking 20 years. But now, when I'm anxious or when I experience a panic attack, I have a mantra that I'm just like, it is what it is, rather than what happened, why, because I can't answer the why.
Oh yeah, and nobody can. And we all, so many people just spend so much time looking forward, and you know, we get lost in that sometimes, for sure.
And also fighting it, right? Now allowing us to feel what we were feeling at the time, always having to find a reason for it, or fighting it, challenging it, and instead of just letting it be and allowing that to happen, right? So in terms of Noah's House and everything I'm hearing from you, it just sounds like when you talk about essence and you talk about Noah, it sounds like that's a place where people can go and just be themselves, and like, it doesn't matter what reason you're there. It doesn't matter if you're just interested in that community and being around those people, and you know,
Yeah,
just,
absolutely.
it's open. It sounds like it's just open to be there, right?
It's not
And
like
to-
the expectation is you come in with a problem. Sometimes you're
Yeah.
just naturally good and just want that sense of belonging, or
Yeah.
you could be going through something or just a rough day, but any different reason why you'd come in, we're accepting. And everyone can come in, be authentic, and that's kind of what we want.
So let's talk about, grand opening, right? August.
It was in August.
It
It was
was
actually
August,
my
I was gonna
birthday. It
say.
opened
Oh,
actually, which is
yay.
extra
Celebrate.
interesting. Yeah.
Okay, so grand opening August. You all have been working diligently, setting everything up, and it was such a great idea. I mean, we went and visited Noah's house for your grand opening.
I found
thank
it
you for
very,
coming.
very welcoming.
Oh,
Like just the feel,
It's beautiful.
it's beautiful. It's welcoming. There's lots of space. There's people around
There's
doing
puzzles
different things.
Yeah.
that I
exactly.
like.
There's
There's
everything.
coloring.
Yeah.
There's Noah's art
Yes.
everywhere.
Oh yeah.
Which to me, that was like a touch point. So what I felt right away when I walked in was mental health can be defined as anything and everything. So I bring up puzzles, coloring, art. I love how you, all individuals at Noah's House, you all indicated September, a lot of youth, a lot of parents, a lot of educators are going to be going through just finding that routine, the adaptability. We want them to do that in October. Big things, lots of great resources, activities, and events happening at Noah's House. Tell us. I'm eagerly waiting for those.
Yeah, so as of now, like up until now, we've just had our drop-in center open. So for any youth that can come in with, just wanting to hang out or any problems, as I mentioned. But now we start our programming and start kind of trying to educate people and offer those therapeutic workshops for people that could help improve their mental health. So we have 3 that we're going to be running in October. First is like a common craft. So for kids 11 to 14, it's like a therapeutic art session that we're going to be having. That one's starting October 6th. So that one's going to be awesome. We have a second one that's movement for the mind. So, nutrition, fitness, how all like areas of health kind of relate to your, self-esteem and appearance. So we have that. That's going to be October 7th. And then the third one, funny story behind that one, it's the Liberty Project. So it's a project that I actually used to volunteer with. It was the women's rights thing that I mentioned before. So the main like operation of that project is to bring in clients that have faced abuse, addiction, trauma. They offer them consultation and have them make reusable pads that they send to developing nations. But a third side thing for that organization is to provide workshops for high school students where they teach them about any like barriers they could face in their adulthood, like financial literacy, the social issues that exist, and how to build healthy relationships, things like that. And funny enough, myself and another Noah's House member were the 2 that actually designed the workshop as part of another organization. And now we're on the other side of the fence and working the partnership from this side. So that's actually, it comes from another organization, but the workshop itself came from 2 Noah's House members. And that's October 7th. Each of those are 4 weeks, and then we'll restart when the program is over. You can register online at noahshouse.ca.
That's really awesome.
Pretty exciting.
Yeah, thank
What
you.
about volunteers? What if I have some youth or parents listening in and they're like, whoa, this is great. Like, here's the thing. We had a great conversation right before we were filming, and I always like to, I find that we should always, to be honest, film the pre-filming.
Just had like hidden cameras in the walls.
Having just a banter. But we spoke about a lot of the times how sometimes, because of stigma around mental health, stigma around suicide, it still very much exists. We are making strides, and to all the youth that openly talk about your feelings and being vulnerable, keep doing it. That is how we're going to eradicate the stigma around mental health. But a great way to kind of go around that stigma is, well, go volunteer. Seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I've been finding. And that's what we talked about earlier. Like, even the example of my thing, like, it's hard to take the first step. Like, when I was depressed, it wasn't that, like, I didn't have people to go to. Like, my family was extremely supportive, almost to the point where I didn't want to drag them down. And so you taking that first step is often difficult, and especially with the stigma around men itself.
Yeah.
And so what I found is, so far through Noah's House, like, of course, we have had our share of clients that have dropped in and have actually openly used the center because they wanted help. But there's also been, I've noticed, like, the volunteers that come in, I'll often come in, they're almost like talking, like having these deep conversations with each other and actually opening up about stuff they went through. And what I'm weirdly finding is maybe like they're not going through something right now, but it's actually helping the mental health of the people working in the center. So what I am going to be expecting, and something I didn't expect going in, was that people who were struggling, as a way to indirectly ask for help, is to be the ones to help others, and in the process open up about their own perspective on things, and their own issues, and their own vulnerability as well. And it'll be therapeutic for them as it would be for anyone openly dropping in. And I love to see it, because personally, any way you get in, I honestly don't care how you get in. As long as you get in and as long as you're using it, like whatever method you want to use to get the help, like as long as we're there to help you and as long as you're respectful once you're inside. So definitely not something I expected, but something I'm blessed to have seen happen. And I've actually been in there for one of those times, and I've weirdly been using it the same way. Like, I've contributed to all those like deep conversations as well. And it's fun. It's really already feeling like a family, and we just kind of open things up.
Mm-hmm.
That's
that's pure support.
I was gonna say what you are speaking of.
Yeah, and
Ewelina just said it.
Support.
peer support. This is what our podcast is about. When we really wanted to, we titled it Keep Connected, all about connections. Yes, us human beings, we thrive on social connections. We get that. But there was a big part of this podcast where we wanted individuals with lived experience sitting here each week. Why? Because through any guest that we have here, I'm inadvertently learning. You are helping me. I am helping you. And that is a beautiful process when someone's story can help us.
Exactly. And again, like that's been kind of my theme ever since Noah passed, is like no longer just doing work for your own personal reason. It's more just like find that vulnerability inside of you, and it leads to this own perspective and its own outlet. And so a lot of people who come in, I'm finding that their perspective is bleeding out, and you know that there's vulnerability inside, even if anybody doesn't want to express that directly. You can tell just by how they carry themselves and how they speak and what they think of things, that there is, I feel that every authentic person has once felt worthless. And that's my own thing, because everyone, as I mentioned, has to be broken down. And in that cracks and in that imperfection, you find some beauty that can be given to other people. And we're finding that with our volunteers, and I found that with myself and a lot of people I've met throughout the years. And it's beautiful to see and be a part of every day.
Mm-hmm. And it's like those walls we all build up, right? You may see a little bit through the cracks, but until we kind of explore those things, and oftentimes, I mean, I feel like what Noah's House is, aside from the workshops, education, and the walking, I feel like what it gives an opportunity for people to do is go and do activities that are not about mental health, are literally just fun, hang out, and maybe a conversation will spark about something, just like you would with a friend at a coffee shop. But maybe it's a different kind of group of people. Maybe there is something that you can do to help another person, and that gives purpose and meaning, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, that's wonderful. That's so needed. I feel like it's so needed in our community.
Oh, totally.
Sure.
And that's the big thing about it. It's just not just that it is just helping people and giving them that space, but it's laid back too. Like you said, when you were at our open house, it felt like welcoming, and that's the whole point. Like we don't want it to be like what you often hear about mental health. You hear about like the clinical side and the therapy and tell us about everything you're going through. We're going to try to dissect it. There's none of that. It's just well, actually now there is. Actually, that's another thing I want to get into. Sorry to switch the subject on you there, but thanks to you guys and thanks to the Soul Focus Project, we will offer counseling if that is what you need. So yeah, like a short-term 3 to 5 sessions. That's another one you can register at noahshouse.ca. So that is, yeah, and that is that other branch, but the main idea of our drop-in center is we want that laid back where you can just walk in. It's not exactly we're dissecting every part of you. It's just you can walk in and just freely be yourself and be vulnerable in front of people.
And having you on the podcast, speaking about Noah's House in the times we're living in right now, I believe that having the word out there and spreading the news about this hub for youth is very, very important. And the reason I say that is because a lot of youth right now, due to so many changes with COVID, they're lacking those social interactions. They're lacking the freedom to just chill, freaking sit there with a friend, and that is what's needed. So for a lot of youth that are pulling their hairs, pardon me, but through online learning or feeling disconnected, not being able to see one another, maybe it's scheduling a day where, 2 friends decide to meet at Noah's House just to hang, right?
Exactly.
Because that is what we need right now more than ever. So many youth have been experiencing varying degrees of isolation and loneliness, and another stressor I thought about for youth, like it comes up all the time in my head. I'm always thinking about what stresses are people experiencing, and finding like dating in the time of, like, seriously, like
So where did they go to
graduating,
date?
like all major changes that we experience as youth, getting into like 18, 19, 20. I couldn't imagine, you know, experiencing so many different stressors. And wouldn't it be awesome to go into a beautiful facility that is super welcoming and just being like, I miss people. I just want to be around people.
Yeah, exactly. And trust me, being alone and isolated, you can drive yourself a little crazy, let's be honest. So yeah, having that belonging and having those people to connect with, I'm glad it opened at the perfect time. And it was one of those, at first I'm like, oh, do I want to open during COVID or when like we can make use of everything? But it's more needed now than ever. So like actually having that connection and making this available to people in a time where mental health is like hitting an all-time low for people, it actually adds the weight to it. At first, I didn't know what to feel, but now I'm thinking, yeah, how perfect actually is this that we open now?
And it's also, like, when I mentioned it's needed, because it's not like clinical, like you mentioned. When you walk in, it feels like it's called Noah's house. It feels like it could be almost like someone's house, except like a really nice house. So it's really like, there's no sense of like you're walking into some sort of medical facility of some sort. It's literally walking into, you know, a welcoming home of some sort, which is so needed. And it's created, and you could tell youth thought about ways to make it cool and make it accessible and make it a place where people want to hang out, because it was created by them. That was their idea. So it's not like an adult is thinking of what youth might like, but it was actually youth thinking about what other youth might like, right?
No,
and that's
yeah,
super
definitely.
powerful.
Oh, absolutely, it
So,
is. And that's what I
really
want to.
cool.
That's what I want to create with this. And again, going back to the thing I said about the volunteers, it's like throughout life, you know, people are going to go to you for things. You're going to go to people for things. It's more of a team building thing. I don't think there's ever one person that can be the nucleus for everybody. And the one person that I thought maybe could was Noah, because that's what he tried to be all his life. But in reality, us, like, we're all going to be vulnerable. We're all going to be broken. And so having that group, having the ability to not just help somebody, but have someone help you and have that kind of connection there is absolutely perfect. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Peter, for joining us. It's been awesome. Once again, please, everyone interested listening, check out Noah's House Mental Health Foundation. The website is noahshouse.ca. I was just going to say, I'm pretty sure it's noahshouse.ca.
Yeah.
And here's something to be said for this. We spoke about clinical, right? And something resonated when you indicated, Peter, well, I'm experiencing all these things, but yet I don't want to reach out because I don't know why I'm feeling this. So a lot of youth, anybody who might be experiencing just a lot of, I call it ebb and flow. You're just ebbing and flowing in a roller coaster, and you're just trying to grapple with what is going on. Listen to this. Oftentimes, the reason why we don't access services, sometimes, quite frankly, and I bring it back to myself at 18, having panic attacks, freaking out, not knowing what's going on, I didn't access services. Why? Because I didn't know what led to the anxiety or the panic. So it scared the crap out of me. So I remained in utter silence for 2 years rather than accessing a service. Had I known that there was a hub somewhere where I could drop in and maybe work on a puzzle and hear maybe two people having a conversation about anxiety, probably would have been freaking phenomenal for me in that point, because I truly believed I was by myself.
Exactly. Just that easy way to get assistance, and so far so good. It's been successful for anyone that's dropped in or volunteered or anything, so you're just hoping it keeps up and people find a home.
And that's the thing, it's not just that you're having these conversations. When they're going there, you can help them get connected with whatever they're looking for, which is wonderful, right? So there's if you're not sure where to go, check out Noah's House, ask, the volunteers there. They could probably steer you in the right direction, right? So
exactly.
That's
a step forward, and that's all we can ask.
Exactly.
So one final last question before I'm going to leave you. What is, we always like to ask, what's a great mental health tip? What's your go-to one that you've been using lately?
Mine, it's, and there was a quote I go by, and it was actually an interview that Jim Carrey did. When he had, so he had a documentary a few years ago where like they dialed into his depression, how that related to like a method acting film he did. And so he said, like, depression, think of the word depression as deep rest, because your body needs deep rest from the character you're trying to play. And that's something every few months I go back to think, just to stop myself from going back to what I used to think were like my accomplishments and like what people see when I'm around them is what defines me. In reality, it's the essence behind the character that you're showing, the essence behind the image you're showing people you are. So to have that image of yourself and define yourself by the feeling rather than the image is something I always go to.
Nice. I love it. And I like Jim Carrey's deep rest.
Yeah.
Okay. Mental health tip from you, Ewelina. What have you been focusing on the past, like, 2 weeks? I need to stay in the present moment.
Yeah. It's like even when you do scales and measures, the last 2 weeks.
I'm just like, you know what? I was even going to say, okay, let's be real, the last week.
I always try to focus on being present wherever I am, and not being too hard on myself when, you know, I feel like I should be doing this or that or doing more, and just really being there for the people around me and being connected to them and just trying to have balance, you know, as much as I can, whatever that means to me at that moment or that day or that hour, ensuring that, you know, I am caring for myself and I'm touching base with the people I care about and knowing, you know, my balance and my limits and what I need as well. And yeah, that's where I've been going, because, you know, there's a lot we are exposed to a lot all the time. So it's like, it's just being compassionate and kind to ourselves and to others.
Okay. Well,
Thanks,
thank
Jenny.
you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for listening to CMHA's Keep Connected podcast. Once again, Keep Connected podcast is all about connections. We human beings thrive on social connections, and what better time to connect with peers, individuals with lived experience, music, art, create anything. If you have a story and you are willing or wanting to share on our podcast, please give us a shout out and email us. You can find Ewelina and I at cmha@windsor-essex.ca. Thank you.